You are allowed to start again. As simple as that sentence is, it hits very different when the noise of life dies down. When it's just you and the weight of everything that you haven't completed, or everything that you did wrong, or even everything that you never knew how to face. That moment when the timeline that you imagined for yourself cracks and it becomes something else. That relationship that you were in unravels, the plan that you had set out for everything never held. And now all you're left with is guilt, such as the guilt that you've wasted time, such as the guilt that you're behind, such as the guilt that starting over is something to be ashamed of. The true thing is that this idea that life moves in a straight line, that we'll figure it out and we'll ride out life forever, is just a myth. It shouldn't be taken at face value. It's a comforting myth, it's a clean myth, but it's not truthful. In reality, life is far more of a spiral than it is a ladder. It spins around, you return to different things, you revisit those lessons, you outgrow who you were, and sometimes you fall back down to that part, sometimes painfully, sometimes successfully. You shed identities of yourself that you thought were permanent, and often, right before you bloom again, you start to fall apart. And there shouldn't be any shame in that. In fact, that might be the most human thing about you. The philosopher Heraclitus said that no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river and he is not the same man. That is the truth of it. Nothing in life is static. Not the world, not your pain, and certainly not you as a person. However, we're raised to believe that change equals instability. That if you walk away from your career path, you're lost. Or if you leave a long-term relationship, you failed. Maybe if you drop your degree and, quit the team, step off the path, do something different to the normal, you're throwing something away. But what if starting again wasn't treated as losing? What if instead it was treated as a choice? What if it takes more courage to pivot than it does to persist with something that no longer serves you? See, a lot of people stay exactly where they are, and that's not because it's right, but instead because it's known to them. They keep driving down that same road, even long after they've realized it's the wrong one, just because they've already paid the toll for it. That is called the sunk cost fallacy. You stay in a job that you hate because of the years that you've put in, praying for a promotion. You stay in a story that's killing you because of the identity that it's given you, and because you can't drop that identity. However, you as a person are not a fixed object. You don't owe your past self a lifetime of obedience. You owe your future self honesty. The past is the past. The future is to come. So focus on fixing your present so that your future that does come will be better than that past that has already passed. Past that's past. I don't know what I'm saying at this point, bro. Now, where it gets deeper is that we may think that we need permission to begin again, such as someone has to validate our reset, such as someone has to say, okay, you've suffered enough, you may now change your life. The reality and the actual genuine truth for once is that no one is coming. No one is coming to tell you, no one's going to hand you that permission slip, and nobody knows about that quiet ache in your gut and your body better than you ever will. No one else hears that voice at 3 a.m. whispering, this isn't it, man. This fucking life, you're not living the right life. You're not in the right course. You're not in the right job. You're not with the right person. Nobody else will hear that other than you. That voice that you hear isn't some sort of weakness, however. Instead, that voice is direction, and it's never too late to listen. The fear is understandable. We build our lives around stability. We build our lives around mortgages, degrees, expectations. The thought of tearing something down to rebuild feels stupid. It feels reckless. Why would I get rid of everything that I already have just to risk a potentiality? However, take a close look. The real danger isn't in starting again. Instead, in the future, it's staying in a life that no longer fits just because you're scared of the unknown. There is no perfect time. There's simply now, and now is more than enough. Sometimes starting again doesn't look like some sort of grand reinvention. It might be quieter, it might be more subtle. You don't have to burn your whole life down. Sometimes you just have to reapproach the day. You have to reapproach the hour. You just have to reapproach yourself. Starting again could be things like, I'm going to list them off here because there's so many different ways, but I'll give you a few. Starting again might be something like going to therapy, writing a page that you once deleted, saying no in where you used to say yes to everything, eating a real meal after 3 days of spiraling and eating shit, letting go of the apology and the forgiveness that never arrived. It's not always some sort of ginormous monumental achievement. Often it's actually quite mundane and it's quite small. But it all matters, because every single time you choose to meet yourself where you are, instead of shaming yourself for not being further ahead, you reclaim your autonomy. You can say, wow, I can choose again. That means I can begin again. And you can always do that. You never are being isolated from that option of the free will to choose to fix your life. Friedrich Nietzsche also talked about this. He talked about becoming who you are. He talked about doing these things not as a one-off achievement, not as a one-time, success, but instead as a continuous process that will continue to be built upon. It's unfolding, it's forging, and often that means failing with full honesty instead of half succeeding within a lie. You don't owe anyone the person that you used to be. You don't even owe yourself consistency. All you owe yourself is truth and reality. You have the validation within your own life to outgrow things. You are allowed to drop what no longer fits. And don't take this as me giving you permission. I'm simply bringing the truth. I'm reinstating the light within your life that you have this opportunity. You have that opportunity to walk away. And that's not because you're lost, but instead because you're finally willing to, be found. So I stuttered a bit there. Now, take a look for a second. Not everyone will understand your journey. A lot of people will see your pivot into a different direction as instability. A lot of people will even call it selfish because you're not serving them anymore. Some people will resent that version of you that no longer serves them. As I just said, that is the cost of becoming who you have to be. However, you are not here on this planet to be digestible to the stupid fallacy around you. You're here to live your best life. There's fucking 8 billion of us, and I want you to research the idea of Sonder, which, it's kind of a subtopic, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it's just the idea that everyone else lives their own life. Think about 8 billion other people. So many of them spend their entire life trying to please other people. Imagine if everyone just worked on themselves. People would get along in harmony because they're not focusing on pleasing this person and finding conflict in the middle, but then they as a person want to be all the way up here, It shouldn't be a battle to become the best around everyone. It should become a battle to be the best of yourself. All you have been instated on this planet for is to live fully and authentically. And that version of you, the one who listens, who pivoted, the one who dares to begin again, that version is so much closer to peace than the one who performs stability out of fear. Sometimes we stay stuck just because we don't want to face the grief of the time that's wasted. But the paradox is that that time isn't wasted if it's brought you to the realization. If it gave you that data and it gave you that example not to follow again, and it gave you the pain and clarity to know what you no longer want, why would that be failure? That's not failure, that's education. That's realizing who you have to be. If I fail a test and I see, wow, I fucked up this bit, but I did really good here, I fucked up this bit, and I did really good on the rest, what am I going to focus on? The bits that I fucked up, of course. So failing in this sense is actually bringing you to the light to understand what you need to work on. Your past should be the prerequisite to a better future. Your next chapter is now your choice with the educated past. You are not late, you are not broken, you are not behind or anything like that. All you are is alive and human. And as long as that is true, as long as you are alive, you can begin again. So let this video be the reminder. You do not need the world's permission or your parents' permission or your friends' permission or anybody's fucking permission to pivot. You do not need an audience to follow behind your reset. You don't need to justify why the old version of your life doesn't work anymore. You just need to look yourself in the eye and say, I'm not done yet, I'm still here on this planet. I'm still becoming. Because maybe, just maybe for once in your life, you were never lost. Maybe you were simply gathering the courage to start again. So do it. Start again and use that education to become the best version of yourself. Because like I said, there's only one of you and there's 8 billion other people. If you try and please them every single day, you'll kill yourself in the process. Thank you.